Te reo ererangi o te mānia. This episode was produced in Otatahi by Plains Media, with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Spin Me a Tale with Tessa Trolove. Let's step into a world of dragons endearing with Avis and the Promise of Dragons by Healther McQuillan and published by Ahoy, an imprint of the Cuba press in 2019. Close your eyes and let the magic carry you away. Avis slowed her steps. If she walked at a normal pace, then that would put her within the radar of the boys up ahead. So she walked slowly, pausing every now and then to tie an already knotted shoelace or to peer at a flattened bottle cap in the gutter. The boys stopped to collect some sticks from under the large tree at the bottom corner of the school playground before they moved on. When she reached the tree, Avis picked up her own stick as protection. She carried the stick upright and behind her back, where it tapped on her school bag as she walked. The boys ahead broke into a trot and formed a line behind Drake Snelling. Drake wasn't the biggest of them, and he wasn't the smartest of them. He wasn't even that popular, but for some reason the others did what he said, like the time they'd blocked the footpath and made Avis walk on the grass, right into a big dog turd. Drake Snelling hadn't been with them. He was waiting further up the road and acted all innocent, except that he overdid the groans and eye-rolling at the smell of fresh dog poo all over her shoe. Avis knew for certain that he'd set it up for his entertainment and her embarrassment. She wondered what entertainment he had planned now that they were lining up by the high green fence. Not the witch's fence, she thought. They wouldn't dare. The high fence around the witch's house ran the length of the property and right around the corner onto Menagerie Street, where Avis lived at the dead end. She had to pass that fence at least twice every school day and again on the weekends if she wanted to go anywhere. The dark green corrugated iron rose up from the footpath like a fortress wall, broken only by a double gate made of the same iron, held shut by a chain and a padlock. Avis had never seen the gate open. Once, in a moment of great courage, she had peered through the narrow gap below the chain, but all she had seen was a weedy driveway which turned out of a view behind gloomy trees. Her father said that the property would be worth millions. An acre for just one house is unheard of in the city nowadays, he'd said with a hint of envy. Even the quarter-acre paradise no longer exists. All that space for one person. Ridiculous. Avis had never seen the witch, but she'd heard her once, just the week before, as she made one of her early morning dashes to the dairy. With her father and brother both claiming to be night owls and morning sloths, it was Avis's job to buy milk for breakfast when they ran out, which happened a lot. Even though Avis checked at night to see that there was enough, by morning there would be an almost empty bottle sitting on the shelf in the fridge. She was sure Bruno was the culprit, slurping the milk right from the bottle, but when she questioned him, he just shrugged and went back to his bedroom where he'd spent most of his time since turning 14. The morning she'd heard the witch, Avis was strolling home with a plastic milk bottle in one hand and the rising sun warming her back. The high-pitched shriek startled her, and the bottle dropped from her hand and bounced on the footpath. Avis picked it up and ran for home, with the hairs on her arms standing upright. In the days that followed, she crossed the road to avoid passing the witch's house on her early morning milk trips. Before and after school, when there was more traffic, she ran past the high fence and stayed as close to the curb as she could. The line of boys up ahead had stopped, losing formation as they reorganised themselves for the assault. Drake was first. He was cunning enough to know that first position was safest, but he made out that he was being brave in taking the lead. He set off at a casual jog, his stick scraping along the corrugations on the fence with a rat-a-tat-tat. He stopped at the gate and spun around to grin at the next boy, Archie Young, then resumed his clattering, which Archie echoed, rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. It was a pleasing percussive sound until it was joined by a high-pitched shriek, like a cat being scraped along the strings of a violin. that came from behind the fence. The remaining 2 boys did not wait for their signal, but dashed past, throwing their sticks onto the footpath. The chain rattled and the gate opened. Avis stood frozen to the spot with her stick held limply in her hand. The witch locked eyes with her, cold, accusing eyes. Avis let the stick drop guiltily to the ground as the boys scapered around the corner onto Menagerie Street. The witch followed her gaze. "Were you next in line?" the witch asked her, stepping out and blocking her path. Avis was trying to decide whether to run back to school or across the busy road when she heard the shriek again. Once more, the hair stood up on her arms and the back of her neck prickled, but the biggest shock was that the witch had not opened her mouth. Instead, she turned back into her driveway and yelled, "Shut up, Percy! We'll get complaints from the neighbours again!" Then the witch turned her eyes back onto Avis. "Would you like to see Percy?" she asked. "He thinks he's particularly beautiful at the moment, and he wants all the ladies to notice him." She beckoned, and Avis felt the spell reeling her in like a hooked fish. On the weedy driveway stood a peacock proudly displaying a huge fan of a tail. He was turning slightly this way and that to let the light play on the iridescent feathers, making them shimmer and quiver. "He's only a young chap," said the witch. "First mating season over with no peahens to show off to. He'll be glad that someone is taking notice of him. Won't you, Percy, you daft creature?" "Why does he make that creepy noise?" asked Avis, staring at the bird, whose glorious looks were so at odds with the sound it made. "It's either to attract the ladies or to warn other males off his territory. But I reckon he makes an excellent guard dog. He gave those boys a good seeing off, didn't he? Bet there are a few wet pants there." The witch's green eyes twinkled. Avis managed to smile. Drake Snelling had run off as if chased by the devil, but the truth was that her own heart was still pounding hard in her chest. "He gave you a fright too, I think. Sorry about that," the witch continued. "I'm only pet-sitting Percy for a few weeks while my friends are away. They needed someone with a well-fenced place, but a peacock doesn't suit city life. My neighbours have complained more than once about his early morning wake-up calls. Luckily, he's heading home to the farm soon." Avis looked closely at the witch. She wasn't really dressed like a witch. Her jumper was a knitted one in mossy green and seemed way too big for her. The sleeves had been rolled up and it hung halfway down her thighs. She had on a baggy pair of track pants that were a bit worn at the knees and gumboots on her feet. In one hand was a pair of stiff leather gardening gloves. She used the other hand to wipe a lock of thin brownish grey from her eyes, but the rest of her hair was pulled back into a ponytail. Her nose wasn't particularly big or long, and she didn't have a wart on her chin. Avis peered at her hands. No long claw-like nails. When she looked back at the witch's face, she saw that she was being appraised in much the same manner. "You could be just what I need," said the witch. "How old are you?" 11, said Avis. "You like animals, don't you?" "How'd you know?" said Avis, wondering if the witch had special powers. Avis was always telling people that when she grew up she wanted to be a marine biologist or a dog rescue worker or maybe train horses. Anything really, as long as it involved animals, but not a vet, because she didn't want to have to put any pets to sleep. She knew what that really meant. But her greatest, most immediate dream was to have a pet of her own, preferably a golden Labrador puppy, even though her father had vetoed that as a bad idea when they could barely keep enough food in the house for themselves. Somehow the witch seemed to understand all this without being told. "And I bet you'd like to earn some extra pocket money." "I don't get any pocket money," said Avis. "Well then," said the witch, "how would you like a job as my pet sitter while I take Percy back to his home?" "When?" asked Avis, hardly believing her luck, and assuring herself at the same time that this woman was not a witch at all, just a nice lady with a big garden and lots of animals. "How about this weekend? You could call in tomorrow after school to meet the gang, and then I could get away early on Friday and be back on Sunday, unless you have other plans." Avis had no other plans for the weekend. "I can do it," she said, "straight away. It'll give me peace of mind to know someone is looking in on them," said the woman with a smile. "Right then, see you tomorrow. Just rattle the chain on the gate. Percy will let me know when you're here." "Oh my goodness, I don't even know your name." "Avis," said Avis. "What a wonderful name," said the woman. "My name's Melinda, Dr. Melinda Child. Tell your mum and dad the doctor bit. It never fails to impress. When Avis got home, she let herself in with the key that she wore on a cord around her neck. This was the loneliest time of the day, arriving home to an empty house, still and stale from a day of being closed up. She went around and opened some windows, pulling the curtains back as far as they could go to let in more light. She turned on the TV to a quiz show where family teams competed for a car. She left it on for the background noise. Avis wished her perpetual wish that she had a dog. At least a dog would welcome her home and be something warm to hug. A dog or a mother, either would do. In the kitchen, she put Bruno's breakfast dishes into the dishwasher and wiped the bench with a sour-smelling dishcloth, which she rinsed under the hot water tap. She looked around for a snack and had just finished cutting some brown spots off an apple when Bruno got home. Avis looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 3:37. Even if Bruno had left his school on the bell at 3:20 and caught the bus straight away, there was no way he could make it home before 3:50. "Where have you been?" she asked. "Where do you think?" he said, shambling into the kitchen and grabbing a bag of salt and vinegar chips from the open pantry. "Not at school anyway," said Avis. "I'll tell Dad." Too late. Ralphie already knows. School phoned him and he texted me. Bruno tore open the foil packet and the chips spilled over the bench and a few onto the floor. He scooped the ones on the bench back into the packet and sneered at Avis from beneath his shaggy head of hair. "The fact that I've just spoiled your telltale fun is the best news I've had all day." He lumbered out of the kitchen, and Avis heard his bedroom door slam and the boom-boom bass of his music. She got the dustpan out of the cupboard under the sink and swept up the fallen chips. After that, she curled up on the couch to watch a show where people were mean about each other's cooking and waited for the argument that was bound to happen when their dad got home. The next morning, Avis checked the fridge for milk and was surprised to find that the bottle was still half full. That meant Bruno had not come out for a midnight slurp, nor was there any sign of him coming out for breakfast. Dad was in the shower. The storm of the night before, where words were shouted and doors were slammed, had passed into an unsettled calm before Avis had gone to sleep. She poured a modicum of milk onto her cornflakes and went into the family room to watch the morning cartoons. She heard her father come out of his room and knock on Bruno's door. There was a muffled conversation, a quietly closing door, and then rattling around the kitchen. Avis moved quietly around her father to put her bowl and spoon in the dishwasher. "Is Bruno going to school?" she asked. "I'm working on it," Dad said. "I'm working on it." This was her father's stock reply, which Avis had learned really meant, "I won't do anything because I have no idea what to do." He'd said it in the last school holidays when she had asked if they could go away for a camping trip. They never went. He said it when the lawnmower broke and it needed to get fixed. The lawnmower was rusting on the overgrown lawn where it had conked out. "I've got a job," said Avis, as she spread peanut butter onto 2 slices of stale bread. The crust cracked when she folded the sandwiches to put in her lunchbox. "I'm going to be a pet sitter for this lady who lives near school. I'm going over to meet all her animals today. She has a peacock too, but I won't be looking after that." Avis looked up to see her dad's reaction, but instead of listening, he was hunting for the remote to change the TV channel to the morning news. "She's a doctor, so that's sure to impress," she said. That's great, Avis," her father replied. And then he found the remote and seemed very focused on the share price index, even though Avis knew that he didn't own any shares. At least it wasn't the sport news, thought Avis, leaving quickly before it came on. She couldn't bear watching her dad watching the sports news, especially when they mentioned Aaron Miller. After school, Avis got away quickly from the classroom, but not quick enough to escape Drake Snelling, who was waiting by the path. "Hey, Mavis," he called to her. "What did the witch do to you when she caught you?" "She's not a witch," said Avis, who had given up correcting Drake about her name. "She screeches like one," he said. "That's not her, it's her pet peacock." "A peacock, whatever." "It is," said Avis. "I saw it, and his name is Percy." Drake's mouth curled into a sneer, and he let out an exaggerated laugh. "Prove it. Get me one of its feathers," he said. "I bet you're lying." "Am not," said Avis out of the corner of her mouth. She walked on with her head down. Drake followed her. "Hey, Mavis, can you get me Aaron Miller's autograph?" Drake's friends had joined him by then, and they all laughed as she scuttled away, her cheeks blazing at the mention of that name. The other kids thought it was cool that she knew him, but Drake used the name Aaron Miller like a weapon. He knew that every time she heard that name, it added a little to her pain. Avis had stopped hating Aaron Miller for taking her mother away. Her mother had made that choice. But she hated hearing his name, and most of all she hated that everybody knew her family's business. She wished her mother had chosen to run off with someone no one had ever heard of, someone the gossip magazines didn't care about. Everyone knew the name of the ex-All Black turned traitor, Aaron Miller, and everyone seemed to think that they had the right to know all about his private life. This time, when Avis reached the green fence, she walked close beside it, not on the curb, and when she got to the gate, she rattled the chain loudly. Percy screeched a challenge. Melinda, who was dressed in a very smart green suit with high heels and an autumn-toned silk scarf tied at her neck, opened the gate. A shiny slide held her hair back off her face. "I've only just got in myself," she said, greeting. "Come on inside while I changed into something more sensible than my begging clothes." "You look really nice," said Avis. "They don't look like beggars' clothes to me." "No, they don't," laughed Melinda. "That's the irony of all of it. This is what I have to wear when I go begging for funds for my scientific research. You have to look responsible and successful before they give you the money to enable you to be responsible and successful." Avis thought about what her dad had said about the value of the property. "Aren't doctors supposed to be rich?" she said. "Not this doctor," Melinda said, walking up the driveway. Percy followed them until he became distracted by something tasty in the flower bed. They walked past an unkempt garden full of shrubs choking each other for space. "This is where I grew up," said Melinda. "We had a gardener then." She waved her hands at the ground, which Avis could see had once been park-like. Today, dead leaves smothered the grass and wild seedlings had claimed space to stand. "I have other priorities now, so I just do what I can to stop nature from turning to total chaos. In fact, I quite like it this way." They passed a small white van parked in front of a rotting wooden garage and edged their way through a gap in an overgrown hedge. The house was on a lean to the left, and its white paint was peeling. A veranda with a curved, rusty roof ran around two sides. Melinda ushered Avis through the hallway and into a cluttered kitchen with a large wooden dining table. The table and some of the chairs were covered in stacks of papers and books with brightly coloured sticky notes poking out like carnival flags. "I'll just get changed," called Melinda, and left Avis alone. Avis peeked into the hallway and saw a long dark corridor with closed doors all along it. She went back into the kitchen and looked about for the cats or the dogs that she was expecting to pet sit. There were no dog baskets or food bowls. Neither was there a bird cage in the corner nor a fish tank on the sideboard. A smell of vinegar and lemons lingered in the air, and in the background something damp and earthy, but nothing that smelt of dog or cat or animal. The hairs on the back of her neck started to prickle. Melinda came back in, dressed in jeans, sneakers and a brown t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail again. She poured herself a drink of water from the tap. The water took its time to come out, and the plumbing complained noisily. "Want one?" she asked Avis, and reached up to get another glass when Avis nodded. She brought it over to the table. "You're a brave girl, coming back to the witch's house." Avis had just taken a sip of water, and it choked her as she gasped. "It's all right," laughed Melinda. "I hear what the kids say when they run past. In fact, I really like it. It means that they all avoid the place and don't disturb my animals." "Where are the animals?" asked Avis, eagerly looking out the window, hoping to catch sight of a lamb or maybe even a pony. "Are they in your backyard?" "That's exactly where they are," said Melinda. "Let's go meet the gang." Melinda led Avis along the corridor and through a large laundry room with a stone tub in one corner. The back door opened onto a surprising backyard. Instead of a clothesline and a vegetable garden, it was almost completely filled up with a plastic tunnel-shaped building, like the ones they have at garden centres to shelter tender plants. Surrounding the whole thing was a high mesh metal fence with an electric wire running around the top. The entranceway was a small square shed adjoined to the tunnel house. Melinda opened the lock on the doors by punching in a series of number. "I'll have to tell you the code, but you mustn't write it down," she said. "Do you have a good memory, Avis?" Avis stood back, looking at all of the security features. Ordinary animals wouldn't need this level of security. Her heart started to pound a little harder. Melinda beckoned to her, and when Avis had stepped through the door into the shed, it swung with a loud clank behind her. There was a desk and a wooden chair, and on the opposite wall, another security door to let them into the tunnel house. On the wall hung a couple of white papery suits. Melinda handed one to Avis to put on over her clothes and showed her how to tuck all of her hair inside a paper hat. Then they put little paper covers over their shoes. Melinda punched in a new code and started to open the door into the tunnel house. "Wait," said Avis. "Are you sure this is safe? I mean, my dad wouldn't want me doing anything dangerous. I'm still just a kid." "What?" asked Melinda. Then she laughed. "Oh, do you mean all this security? This isn't to keep you safe. This is to keep them safe. I can't afford to let a single one of them eat something it shouldn't, or catch a virus, or be set free by some well-meaning but stupid person. I'm the only hope of survival for some of my babies. And now we're adding you into the equation, Avis. But, and this is a very big but, you can't tell anyone what I'm doing here. I haven't exactly got all of the paperwork and the proper permits for some of this lot. Do you understand?" Avis's fingertips started to tingle. This was a secret, and Avis loved secrets. In fact, she thought that more people should keep more things secret. All of her life, whenever someone had said, "Can you keep a secret?" she had felt the same tingle as she waited for them to tell her what it was. The only problem was that nobody ever told her a secret worthy of the tingle, until now perhaps. "I can keep secrets," said Avis. "I'm really good at it. But if it's a bad secret, like if someone is going to get hurt, then I won't keep it." "Very wise," said Belinda. "I can only hope that it's the best secret you've ever had to keep." She rested her hand on the door handle and smiled at Avis. "Inside here are some of the most endangered creatures on Earth. In some cases, I believe that I have the only breeding pair left. I've had to save them from the destruction of their habitats and from greedy collectors and corrupt officials. And people don't like that. That's why I have to be so secretive and so security conscious. Not everything I do is entirely legal." The tingling in Avis's fingertips intensified. This was the best sort of secret to have, right and wrong at the same time. "Ready to meet the gang?" asked Melinda. "Ready," said Avis, and they stepped into the tunnel house. That's all for today's adventure on Spin Me a Tale. Don't miss the next chapter coming your way next Saturday at 9:30 a.m. on Plains Media, broadcasting on 96.9 FM. Stay curious and keep the magic alive.